this webinar that we're going to be doing here for the next hour or so. The webinar is entitled Tips from the Masters, the Mediator's Perspective on Getting the Most from Your Online Mediation. This is Florida Bar course number 3997. And I am one of the presenters. My name is Christina Magee. I am the former chair of the ADR section for the Florida Bar. I am a mediator and arbitrator, and I have a practice in Central Florida that concentrates solely on dispute resolution. I'm going to let John Salmon introduce himself, but he is my co-presenter today, and he can tell you about his wonderful contributions to the world of mediation. What I will tell you about John is this, is that he has so much experience and has done so many things as a neutral that any experience or tips that he's willing to share are certainly worth your time and attention. John, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Chris. Chris left off about 45 things from her list of things that she is good at, including being a wonderful mediator and candidly good with all this Zoom stuff, which is what we're here and online stuff to talk about today. Yes, I am John Salmon. I am with Salmon and Dahlberg Dispute Resolution. We are primarily located in South Florida, but have a statewide and now with Zoom a nationwide presence. We have 26 mediators, and I'm going to tell you every one of them is perfect. So that's the way we're supposed to talk about our panel. I've mediated maybe 7,000 plus cases over the past 30 years. This is my 30th year as a full-time neutral. I have also done probably 40 or more Zoom mediations in the past 2 years of March and April. So I've got some experience with that. Like Chris, I'm a member of the National Academy of Distinguished Neutrals. I'm a fellow of the American College of Civil Trial Mediators. I'm a past president and award merit winner of the Florida Academy of Professional Mediators, all of which means that I'm in a bunch of organizations. That's about it. What I am most happy about, and Chris is the reason, is that 2 years ago, she put out a request for anybody who would like to be involved in creating a mentoring academy for mediators of the next generation coming up to replace people candidly that look like me. And she took the lead on that, and we have had one highly successful mentoring academy. And for any of you who would like to participate in that, just watch for the ADR section notices. Is that fair enough, Chris?
Yes, that is. We are planning to continue with that format because it was so well received. We got a lot of terrific responses from neutrals throughout the state. And I think the experienced neutrals who came to present and got to share ideas and tips and different approaches to difficult problems that can come up in the context of an ADR proceeding were as delighted as the participants who were there to learn how to do those things. So all worked out very well. All right.
One second, Chris. One of the things about, and we'll talk about a little bit about it today, I'll talk about it later. Mediation is one of the most solitary professions, solitary practice areas in the practice of law. There are no second chairs. There is no ability to have somebody else covering your back, making sure that the questions you asked are appropriate, making sure that you haven't messed it up, for lack of a better technical term. So part of the Mentoring Academy and some of the other programs we're going to be doing with the ADR section, I expect, will be allowing mediators to spend time talking with other mediators about how to handle problems. Today, I think we're focusing on how to do this virtually, but just keep that in mind that there should be some more programs coming down the pike. All right, Chris, you're on.
All right, so I'm going to start our PowerPoint and jump right into our slides and talk about what we're going to do here today and how this is going to go. So we're going to move directly to what you can expect when you finish this webinar. we are going to be talking about what is necessary and essential for an effective online ADR session. We're going to spend some time talking about the evolving best practices that govern online mediations, because while many things are the same as an in-person mediation, there are quite a few things that are different. And as people begin to do more and more of these online, it's not as if online mediation is something new that was just birthed in March of 2020. That has been, people have been using various platforms for quite some time, but now we have an exponentially increase in the volume of practitioners. And as more people get involved in doing this, we are seeing that other folks have different ideas about how we ought to be approaching some of the practical aspects of it. And we want to talk about those. Finally, we're going to talk about settlement obstacles. What is unique to this environment? What are those new challenges? And what can you do to resolve them as the neutral in your ADR proceeding when it is being conducted online? All right, let's start with evaluating an online platform. I always start with the premise that you need to have a good understanding of what ADR purpose you're going to be addressing in this proceeding. As it goes without saying that a mediation is very different from an arbitration. And those in turn are very different from mutual evaluations, and a voluntary trial resolution is another unique animal that exists in Florida as means of conducting ADR. So in a mediation, you need to have a platform that will allow you the ability to meet privately with the parties and to meet with different combinations of those parties. You need to be able to meet with one side, and you need to be able to meet with the opposing side. You need to be able to pull the lawyers out sometimes. But if you don't have the ability to do those kinds of things in a particular platform, your mediation is going to be difficult. And difficulty in the use of the technology sometimes translates into an inability to effectively facilitate a resolution for those parties. If you are talking about arbitration, think about what happens in an arbitration. The parties are there. They don't need to meet with each other. And in fact, some arbitrators don't want lawyers and clients to have private conferences during the proceeding. So you don't need to have that ability to have breakout rooms for the participants in the arbitration. What you do need, though, is you need a robust platform, because you are funneling in testimony and you're funneling in evidence that the arbitrator needs to be aware of. And if you don't have a platform that allows for that kind of heavy document or heavy evidentiary opportunity, then you're not going to be able to conduct your arbitration as effectively. A neutral evaluation is certainly something that a mediation may morph into. And under those circumstances, you want to be thinking about, what do I need? Do I still need my breakout rooms, or am I really talking about something that now is looking a little bit more like an arbitration? Can we do it in this platform? And last but not least, we'll talk about voluntary trial resolution. Some people refer to this in Florida as rent-a-judge. Of course, it can be. It can be the use of focus groups where you have people taking on the role, lawyers taking on the role of opposing counsel who aren't actually representing the parties in the case. Hiring a jury that looks like the venue that your case is going to be conducted in, so that you can get more information that will allow the parties who are concerned in the proceeding to get definite information about how their case is going to be heard and perceived, so that they can make an informed decision about taking care of resolving the case or not. So let's talk about some of the platforms that are out there. Some of the popular platforms for this, and I am not an advocate for any of these platforms, and I have not used every single one of these platforms for a mediation. And I'll tell you candidly that I have a favorite, because I think it's the default that everybody is ending up with. And that is the platform that we're on right now. It's Zoom. That is a platform that works exceedingly well in terms of mediation. Why? It's easy to use. People who don't have any real technological expertise find Zoom pretty straightforward and pretty transparent. And so that's plus number one. But plus number two is that Zoom makes it very easy to set up caucus areas, conference rooms and breakout rooms. And having that ability seems to really make mediation go a lot more smoothly in the online context. Another popular platform is WebEx. This is Cisco's product. There are a lot of folks who really like WebEx because of its intense security. And there are certain corporate clients who insist on using WebEx, and that's fine. The difficulty with WebEx is that you can't set up conference rooms or breakouts inside the original meeting. Instead, you have to establish multiple meetings. So for a mediator, what does that mean? That means you have to keep track of all those URLs. And sometimes that can be tricky. You get more than two parties or two sides participating in your mediation. That can get very tricky, and you need to have a strategy for dealing with that. Microsoft Teams. This is a very robust program and terrific if you are working in an enterprise or you are a law firm and you want to set up a war room. Microsoft Teams is a fabulous product. It allows you to contain all kinds of information and it's all there in one place. That may not necessarily be where you want to have your mediation. You know, if you think this is a parallel to in-person mediations, when parties have discussions about where should the mediation take place? Should we do it at my office? And one of the reasons for, no, I don't want you in my office is because I have all the stuff in my office. And if you say, well, I want to look at document X, you know, and I haven't brought document X with me to the mediation, then if we're conducting the mediation in my office, well, that excuse goes out the window, doesn't it? The problem, or Microsoft Teams does also allow you to set up private channels within a particular team. And that will let you go ahead and have caucus rooms. They're not easy to move between and among, and you need to train the participants before you turn them loose in Microsoft Teams in order to make sure that they're going where they're supposed to go and that they actually get there. That's a little more time intensive, and it takes a little facility with the program in order to be able to do that. I want to talk about Blue Jeans. I've not used this program, so I can't give you any personal responses to it. It's owned by Verizon, and some people are big fans of Blue Jeans. It seems to have a lot of facility. One of the facilities it does not have, though, is it does not have the ability to set up breakout rooms at this point. Same thing with GoToMeeting. A lot of people like GoToMeeting. Instead of being in little gallery tiles and set up like the Brady Bunch or Hollywood Squares, instead they have these friendly circles, and the circles can move around on the screen and they can intersect, and you know, it just feels very friendly, and some people like it better for that purpose. But again, no breakout rooms, and so you either have to set up multiple meetings or you have to have some people coming in by phone and some people coming in through the video conferencing app, and John's going to be talking about that. Modron, which you may or may not hear of, is very popular with international mediators and people from around the world. It comes out of Australia. The people who use it as mediators love it. And the reason they love it is because it's a fully contained application. You can set up your files in there, you can conduct your mediation there, and you can bill for it, all within the same application. You can get your settlement documents executed all while within Modron, and you don't have to go in and out of the application the way we do in other applications that we're talking about for online platforms. The last one on here is Google Meet. Google has been playing catch up, in my opinion, with what's going on with Zoom, WebEx, and Teams. And so Google Meet is making changes to what was formerly known as Hangouts. Unfortunately, at the moment, they don't have an easily facilitated breakout or conference room caucus aspect to it. And so again, you're stuck managing multiple URLs if you're going to be using Google Meet.
Chris, let me jump in for 1 minute. You can switch slides.
Yep.
Yesterday, after this slide was prepared, I got an email from one of my panel members he received an email about a company, I'm going to call it Mediation Suites or something similar to that, which is looks to me very quickly to be a Zoom alternative. And so you will begin to see entrepreneurial websites trying to go for different types of business models. So I'm going to give you my opinion. Stick with Zoom. If you can, it's the easiest and most intuitive to use. And the most important thing about Zoom is that a participant, a client in a personal injury case being brought into a virtual mediation, sitting at her kitchen table with her nephew translating for her, does not need to have Zoom on their computer or their tablet or their phone. There's no requirement to have the program in order to be linked in. So I just want to, and LinkedIn will probably get into this too, as I mentioned it. All right, Chris, keep going.
No, I good. And I agree that, it's important to find the one that works best for you.
Right.
However, on Grandparents' Day, which was the Sunday after Mother's Day, Zoom went down. They got overloaded and they crashed. And so I think it's important to have a plan B. Plus, if you have a client who comes to you, some insurance companies are only using Microsoft Teams or only using WebEx and aren't allowing their adjusters to appear or to participate in ADR proceedings that are taking place on another platform. And if you as a neutral don't understand these platforms, never worked in these platforms, and can only hold yourself out as, I can only work in Zoom, I think you're going to be missing out on some things. You need to be able to at least have a nodding acquaintance with some of these other platforms. And you also need to have a plan B for the day that something happens and you cannot turn to your favorite or the one that we're all defaulting to because the whole world's on Zoom, right? So we need to have a little thought process to that. I've also heard about Mediation Suites, but I have not attended any of their sales presentations, so I can't tell you yet whether there's something good about it or something bad about it. Okay, so one of the must-have features that we have to have, and I'm going to start this and then I'm going to turn it over to John with the next slide, is that you have to be able to include external people, people who are outside the enterprise. So I'm going to use Microsoft Teams as an example, right? So if you are going to set up a team for a mediation, you need to be able to include outsiders. When we say outsiders, what I mean are people who are not a part of the firm, not a part of the organization, not a part of the enterprise that is actually establishing the team, right? So we need to get the ability to do that. If Microsoft Teams did not have that ability, then we couldn't use it. It would only be an internal for the organization kind of product. Right, so make sure that you have whatever product you're using will let you go to outsiders. Of course, when the outsiders come in, they do not have the same capacity as the insiders in the organization, which is a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. It's depending on what you want to do with your proceeding. But you do at least have that minimal ability to have outsiders. Zoom, of course, everybody's an outsider because there is no home base that you set up in Zoom. In the beginning days, before March of 2020, I guess they'll be calling that the beginning time for Zoom, although that's a fairly new product. It only got started in 2011. But in the beginning times, you could set up a conference room that would always be yours. It would have my ID on it, and everybody who came to mediate with me online would get that ID, and they would not get anything else, and they would not get a password. Of course, in order to address security features, those days are long in the rearview mirror. I'm changing the slide and turning this over to John.
Thank you, Chris. Just one brief comment. I was asked to participate with a practice group last week at one of the largest firms in Florida, which that's all you need to know. And we tried to do it on Blue Jeans, and I could not get in because it was their internal platform. And we had to switch to Zoom. So just so you know that sometimes what Chris is saying is correct. All right, let's talk about some must-have features of a of a virtual platform. And most of these are pretty self-evident. I have a thing about whenever I teach that I state the obvious about 1,000,000 times because we forget the obvious as we get into the minutia. You have to have an ability to monitor and control who attends the mediation, okay? Who can get in, who can get out. We'll talk about how you check that. Will everybody be on by camera or only by phone or neither? I had a situation last week where the person who was attending from their living room, from their kitchen table, could not hear. So the attorney, who was fine on Zoom, put them on his speaker phone, and they could hear us through the speaker phone while we were all on Zoom. So you always have to be aware of a workaround. People who typically attend that you have to discuss, the attorneys, the parties, non-party participants, like expert witnesses, public adjusters, financial planners, people who candidly people rely on. There's no difference between an in-person mediation and a virtual mediation. They both have the same components. Decision makers very often need somebody to rely upon in order to make a decision, such as a family member, or we'll call them a hand holder or a confidant. Interpreters, always an issue. You have professional, and then you have the niece, the nephew, the son, the husband, the wife, the next door neighbor, the paralegal, the attorney's secretary, who's going to function as the interpreter. One trick that I learned 2 weeks ago was it was a simultaneous interpreter, but it also worked with the family member interpreter. Put them on mute while the person's making their presentation, because otherwise you're going to hear them interpreting back and forth between each other. And as long as I said to them, look, Mr. or Miss Interpreter, just wave if you need us to slow down. And it worked fine. And so a couple of times I got the slow down, and we slowed down. And you have to be able to confirm if a non-participant is attending. We'll talk about that more in a couple minutes. Okay, here's what your system has to have. Obviously, the ability for multiple rooms. One historical thing about Zoom, I spoke to a couple of my colleagues across the country when this all started. When Zoom started, they did not have conference rooms, but several mediators figured out this was possibly a good thing for mediation and approached Zoom and asked them if they could figure out how to do separate breakout rooms. And two people much smarter than me, I'm more of a Luddite in these things, just ended up probably in 15 minutes creating the breakout room feature. So, we mediators are everywhere. We're changing the world. Multiple rooms. You have to have a waiting room. Our waiting room actually has our logo and a little message. Welcome to Magee versus Salmon. Your mediator knows you're here. We'll be with you in a few minutes. Have a nice day. Then there's the main session room where you do your breakout, where you do your presentations. Has to have multiple secure breakout rooms and the ability for you to assign people to those rooms, move people easily between rooms, allow you to pop in and out. For Harry Potter fans, I love apparating into a room without them knowing I'm coming. It's fun. But you can also say, how do you want me to get into a room? We'll talk about that later. And how you can maintain contact with everybody when in a breakout room. I will tell you, with Zoom, that's not the greatest feature. You can broadcast to the breakout rooms, but sometimes people don't see it. And so therefore you end up with using the phone, which we'll talk about. Are these platforms, go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that is one of the one of the things that you can't get in Zoom. And we have been asking for it. So Zoom is pretty responsive to the people who use it. And there has been a lot of traffic on the issue of, can we get a doorbell? Can we get a door knocker? Can we get some way to warn people in advance that we're coming in? Because you don't want to walk into the middle of an attorney client conference.
Well,
That's where you want to be as a mediator.
I handle that by when I meet with them the first time in their breakout room, I simply ask, okay, if you're going to be talking privately, there are a couple of ways that or I'm going to go talk with the other folks. There are a couple of ways I can let you know when I'm coming back. I can either broadcast a message, which you might not see, or I can text you, or I can just pop in. Which do you prefer? And usually I get the just pop in version because you really just pop in and then they stop talking. And sometimes I've had to text me in advance, and that works too. It's all modifying. All right, everybody's talking about whether or not these platforms are secure. They're as secure as they are in a regular mediation. Okay, once you leave a caucus room in a regular mediation, you don't know who the people are talking to as much of a lecture as you give them not to talk to somebody. Zoom, yesterday, I got an email from Zoom. We're putting out another update. So please put out your updates, and it's a whole big long thing that they sent me about consent to unmute and a whole bunch of stuff I didn't understand. What I have been told by everybody is every time you have a Zoom update come to you, just update it. Several weeks ago, a little feature appeared in the top left-hand corner of my screen with a shield that if you run your mouse over it, it says this is encrypted. So they're working on it. Can you keep the mediation secure the same way you would as an in-person mediation? You just tell people not to talk about it. Can you prevent it from being unsecure? No. I mean, that's the reality of it. They're going to walk into the hallway at my office and call their best friend and tell them everything about what's going on, even though I've told them not to do that.
Right. So, but John, you do have that situation sometimes where, you tell the parties, oh, we want to keep it all confidential. And if you go outside of these four walls with what's taken place, or if you need to make a phone call to somebody, let me know as the mediator, because I'd like to have a conversation with them to make sure that individual understands that we need to keep this as a secure proceeding and confidential. So we're all in compliance with the Mediation Confidentiality and Privilege Act. So that's what mediators do, and neutrals do that routinely, in person or online. But there is nifty technology out there. I mean, I know that we are having this recorded, and the participants don't know that it's being recorded, but of course it has to be recorded so it can be put out there for other participants to see. But if I were in a mediation, somebody could be recording what's taking place in the mediation, and it won't show up on Zoom because it's not a Zoom application. Correct. It's a different application on the computer. And so those things need to be discussed to make sure that you do get into a little bit of that nitty-gritty, I think, to say, nobody can be recording this. That would be a violation of the Confidentiality and Privilege Act. And so I'm telling you that. And then what I ask people to do is to affirm that if they are alone in a room, that they are alone in the room when we're having conversations about what is taking place, and that there isn't somebody off camera who is either coaching or listening or doing whatever. So
Chris, you're absolutely right. I'm even more blunt. Do not record this.
Yeah.
We have disabled the recording feature. Do not take photos. Do not have somebody standing nearby. Now you get a tell, okay? Chris, start telling me here's what you see. You're talking to somebody and see them go like this. There's somebody sitting on the couch over there listening to the whole thing. And that's when you say, please remember that this is a confidential proceeding. I need to know if anybody else is in the room. The point I'm making is it's different than an in-person mediation, but at the same time, it's exactly the same for those issues. So be cool. That was my great piece of advice there.
Yeah.
Next slide, Chris.
Oh, sure. But I would just say, anticipate that this is going to happen. Know that it's coming, and then just have some, so that you're not knocked off the box as the neutral the first time that you see somebody do that. Or, when you're having the arbitration proceeding and you're looking at the witness testifying and you see the witness do that, look to the side and go, did I get it all?
Yeah.
That's a problem that you need to, now you got to address that as the arbitration neutral and say something about, admissibility versus weight, right? In order to continue with the proceedings so that it doesn't entirely blow up.
What we're going to be doing now for the next few minutes is going over the things that are shown on this slide. We're going to deal with some of the internal things with regard to how to prepare, how to do some best practices. I'm going to give you some basic rundown of information. Chris is then going to go into what types of things you are not able to do as well in a virtual mediation, because it's virtual, that you can do when it's in person. All right, so Chris, let me run through my stuff here.
Okay.
And then you'll take over.
Okay, I'm going to the next one.
All right. Setting up the mediation. These are, I call these, or somebody else taught me this, but I like it. This is the before. Okay. What to do when the mediation, before the mediation starts. You're going to have an engagement letter. You're going to have perhaps a welcome phone call. We've adjusted all our engagement letters and our notice of mediations to talk about that it's a virtual mediation, that it's on Zoom, that the rules are a little bit different. You're going to get the link, all the standard stuff that sets it up. We have guidelines that go out as part of our package to people about how to deal with a virtual mediation, what to expect. We always, right at the beginning of every mediation, or as early as possible, I make sure I have everybody's cell phone numbers. They have my cell phone numbers, the email of any people who are attending, the attorneys, the participants. I'll tell you why in a moment. And there's really no better thing for all of these things than to practice. I mean, I'm blessed with a panel. We can always put groups together and practice, but if you don't have a panel, call me and I'll help you set up something to practice if you want, but you got to practice. Next.
No, you got to practice. And I just want to say one thing about this, John. I want to ask you a question, because
Sure.
what I hear every time I talk to mediators or neutrals, I always ask them if they're working online, and then I always ask them this question, and that is, how do you feel about the complementary practice session? And do you offer that to participants? Or is that something you started with, and then as we proceed and everybody gets more familiar with this concept of online neutral proceeding, is that kind of fading away?
I will help. I will always offer to help anybody with anything. There is a difference between being a host and being a participant. I'm always willing to, I start every mediation and I'll look at the lawyers, many of whom I'll know, and say, listen, Chris, you need to lower your camera. I only see the top of your head, turn a light on, those kinds of things. I hope you don't mind me helping you. They say, no, help me. It's, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Okay. These are in the days before. You have to, this is all for you, and it's all for the participants. I will sometimes contact people. I have to say, it's good equipment is crucial. There's no question of it. Go spend the money. This is the new normal. Get the best camera, the best mic. The younger people in my family now have me on 2 screens. I will never go back to 1, so that I can have things, a summary or something up on 1 screen and have the Zoom screen up. Get a battery backup, a UPS. We had one of those thunderstorms the other day, and everybody went out when the power went off, and in less than 5 seconds, everybody came back. I didn't have to restart everything. It's a $200 piece of equipment, get one. Your lighting has to be in front of you. If your lighting is behind you, you look like you're in the witness protection program. How you appear on Zoom is important. Dress like you're going to a in-person mediation. If you put on a jacket and tie, if you put on something other than a t-shirt, I'm not going to comment on whether you wear pants or not. That's up to you. But if you dress professionally, you will act professionally, and slowly you will bring the other people to you. I'm getting less and less attorneys now in t-shirts. You see them in a nice collared shirt or a jacket and tie. Okay, once again, practice. You must be on full screen, at least on Zoom. I can't talk about the other platforms. If you're the host, you will have more buttons on the bottom. so that you can manage your participants and do your breakout rooms. Find out who is going to be attending and how. Some people will not have a camera, but they can attend by phone. Okay, or they can attend by speakerphone. I had one the other day, the lawyer had his client sitting in the room with him. But she was at his front of his desk. I couldn't see her. I said, you got to move around to the side of the desk so I can see you. This is all just practicing. I go on 30 minutes before. I make sure everything's working. Test everything beforehand. By the way, I tell the lawyers this same list of stuff. Okay? Test it beforehand, know who is attending and who is not. Practiced. Chris, next.
Yeah, well, or get there early, right? So there's no substitute for getting in early and making sure that everything is working the way you expect it's going to work. Sometimes it doesn't. Either you had an electrical problem. I've had the same thing happen in a mediation. Afternoon thunderstorm, and we're just wrapping things up, and no electricity, which means no internet, which means, oh, I've disappeared until it all comes back up, right? But fortunately, I had cell phone numbers. And I could text everybody and say, problem, going to be solved. Hang on with me. I'll get back to you in 5 minutes if I'm not back up and running.
Right.
Okay. Here we go.
One of the things that is also you should know with Zoom and some of the other platforms for hire, sometimes somebody will start getting on the day before to make sure they get on, and you'll see that your Zoom conference has been activated. All right, so that's just somebody testing, or the lawyers practicing with their people or something to make sure the link works. All right, during the mediation, I get on 30 minutes before. I immediately go into the breakout room menu. We always have set a room for the for each party already preset. We add a lounge. I add a room for attorneys. I can add as many rooms as I want. Okay, so I have those all preset up before I go in. The waiting room. I don't let anybody into the waiting room unless I know who they are. My general practice is I wait till I see an attorney whose name is on my list. I invite them in. If I don't see an attorney whose name is on my list, I look at their law firm quickly on my second screen and make sure they're not, maybe they're covering. All right. I let the attorneys in and I say, who's coming? Because I will have people in the waiting room who just have a phone number, okay? Or have Aunt Susie's iPad. I don't know who they are. I make sure I have the right people. So keep them in the waiting room until you're ready to admit them. Don't just go admit all, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of people who you have no control over are sitting in your main session room. Main session, I control that. First of all, when I have a team set up, I immediately put them in their waiting room, in their breakout room before we even start. I want to make sure it works. I want to make sure they can get there. And I teach them about how to ask for host and ask for help and how to reach me if they need me. The beauty of Zoom is the ability to screen share. So that what Chris is doing right now is on Zoom, so that lawyers can make PowerPoint presentations, show documents, show photographs. If you're going to screen share, make sure you have a very nice background on your screen in case you share it before setting it up for a document. I tell people, as far as the chat feature on Zoom, don't use it. For two reasons. One, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard of one instance where one of my panel members got a readout of everybody's chats sent to them by Zoom. That's not good. The other is that people will chat with the wrong people by accident. Right. So I tell them not to use it. I go through the same thing that we've discussed. Who's present? I need to monitor that. Breakout rooms is just practice. You can move from room to room in Zoom by leaving the breakout rooms, by just join, by going back to the main room. You can knock. No, you can't. We have not figured out a way to knock other than broadcast, and it goes out to all of the breakout rooms. So as I said before, I asked beforehand, how do you want me to come in? You want me to just pop in, or do you want me to text you first? Okay, once again, even if you're doing it on mediations, there's nothing wrong with the 2 words or few words that says, listen, I'm learning this too. Oops, I'm sorry. We'll figure this out. Okay.
One of the things that I like about Zoom, John, and I don't know how you feel about this, is the security button. There's a little shield that shows up on the host's
Right.
screen. So if somebody is being disruptive, I can put them out of their breakout room and back into the waiting room. And if they get really disruptive, I can toss them from the mediation. Now, I've never had to do that, but the idea that I have that degree of control and can sort of have a graded schedule of consequences, if you will, for people who start to lose it during a mediation, I think is very helpful. And you can once lawyers see you do it, even just remove somebody from a breakout and pop them back into the waiting room, say, you need a break, when I'm going to come back to you in 10 minutes, go get a drink of water, go, just settle yourself down, and I'm going to come talk to you in a few minutes, and we're going to see if we can get you back into this proceeding. Once the lawyers see that happen, they're prepared for it, and then they can assist you in working with their client in order to make sure that things stay where they're supposed to stay, which is on track for the mediation.
One of the things, you're right. One of the things that I do is I will sometimes tell them, look, I say it in jest, but I can mute and prevent you from unmuting yourself. I really haven't had that problem arise. What I have had arise is somebody accidentally or unintentionally is withdrawn from the meeting. So in my opening, I said, look, if you disappear, please just log back in. I will rescue you. I will find you and put you back where you're supposed to be, or call your lawyer, or because your lawyer has my cell phone number. I don't give my cell phone number out to the clients. I give it only to the lawyers, and we'll find you. Okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes people don't have a camera. And so they are appearing on your screen as it looks like an old telephone, like we used to have symbol, and but they can hear everything,
right?
And they can participate. You just have to keep going. Like if you have somebody regularly on the telephone, are you still there? So forth and so on.
And with the security features that Zoom has added, one of the things they've allowed you to do as the host, in other words, you're sitting in the neutral position, you're the mediator, you can lock the proceeding. The only difficulty with locking the proceeding is, yes, you keep outsiders out, but that person who falls out because of ineptness, or they push the wrong button, or they lose their internet connection, can't get back in until you unlock the proceedings again. So, it's always a good idea to make sure that there is some way to communicate. And I like that idea, John, about here's my cell phone, it goes to the lawyers, to counsel who are involved in this proceeding. And then you'd have to tell clients who you assume already know how to reach out and get to their counsel in a heartbeat, or in a position to then say, help me, I've fallen and I can't get up right now, on purposes of what we were doing.
It's funny, Chris. I always meet with the lawyers and say, here's my number, here's your number. When we are in the main session at the beginning, I always say, clients, do you have your lawyer's cell phone number or where to reach them? And lawyers, can you reach your clients? You'd be amazed. They go, oh, no, wait a minute, let me get it.
You're right.
So,
right. Or because they're on Aunt Susie's iPad, right? So the lawyers aren't, cognizant of how to reach out and get that person, or because they have gone somewhere, they've gone in their kid's tree house so that they can have a quiet space in order to be there for the mediation, right? And so they may not have the same devices available to them that they would have at their fingertips if they were in a workplace or in a typical lawyer's office.
I had one yesterday. I am confident the client was in the laundry room.
Yep.
100%. They used Tide. And I know what kind of bleach they use, and it was all on the shelf behind them. All right, Chris, you're on.
So I'm going to talk about some of the unique settlement obstacles that you might encounter in the online environment. John has spent a lot of time talking about how do you prepare, and I think that those things are key. But if we want to talk about some of the things that happen online, one of them is what we refer to as online platform fatigue. Think about what we do with Zoom now and with video conferencing. All of our work takes place on the computer, and we're constantly staring at that computer camera. And also, all of our social takes place. All of our people who are worshiping are doing that until they open up houses of worship. So, they're meeting with their faith leader online. They're having their book club meeting online. They're meeting people are dating, they are meeting up online on their cell phone, and then they're having virtual dates online. And a lot of that's taking place through Zoom. So if you're constantly on Zoom and you're constantly in a video conferencing format, you can reach a point where everything starts to feel very draining and very difficult. And this level of fatigue, I think, can be a real obstacle to getting a case settled, because you can see people, I call it wearing down in a bad way. So in mediation, we have this concept of wearing down. What really means that the neutral is helping a party accept a reality that the party necessarily came into the proceeding not accepting. And if you wear them down in the right way and they get to a point where they can accept that new reality, you're going to get a resolution, because they're in a place that they weren't in when they walked in the door. When you wear down in what I call a bad way, because you're just so tired, that's when the party starts throwing up his or her hands and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't focus anymore. I can't think. I'm just so tired. And I have heard that in a number of mediations. I'm so tired, and I'm tired of being online. So I think that that's something you have to be aware of and ready to deal with as a settlement obstacle. We have the performance anxiety that comes along with always being on. So people are having martini parties online, and then they're getting online with their grandparents, and then they're getting online with their, with their church group. And so this idea that you're always doing everything online creates anxiety for some people, that they never get to be kind of just relaxed and not being on camera and having people looking at them. Because the parties perceive themselves as being judged and being looked at when they're in the video conferencing format. Whereas if they were in person, even though all that might still be taking place, there's something about that perception line that moves backwards, so that parties are very aware of how they look, how they appear, and what they are saying and doing. Again, this kind of anxiety can get in the way of you trying to get your case settled or reach a resolution. The neurologists are going to have a field day with this when they start looking at what happens in video conferencing. And none of this is, this is not peer-reviewed science. This is just my collection of things that have come out from my experience, and also from talking to a lot of neutrals who are doing these kinds of things. This first one is rather substantial and significant. You have users who may not be adept. And because they're not adept, they're going to become frustrated and anxious about getting involved in an online platform. Those are the people you ultimately may want to suggest, if they've tried to practice and they haven't had success, that they come in through the telephone, because you don't want the frustration and anxiety that's related to, I'm not sure what button to push. I can't find the mouse. Why isn't this showing up on my screen the way that you said it was going to show up on my screen? Get in the way of the substantive issues that you need to get after in order to reach a resolution. The next one is what I call the max headroom problem. So users can't decode the digital encoding that takes place when you're in a video format. So you might have the audio is out of sync with the video. And then sometimes you just have that inability to put the two of those together effectively. And so you can't really, your brain doesn't perceive what the other party is trying to show you. And that's one that I think that as they understand the neurological processes better, we'll get some more information about that. This next one is the lack of empathy, right? We're working through the glass. And this is true for the neutrals and the mediators, as well as the parties and their lawyers. Your ability to read the other side. So if I'm sitting in an opening session and I've got people on both sides of the table, and lawyer A is having a field day and going to town on all the things that are wrong with party B's case, the lawyer who's representing party B might start to get a little twitchy. And if I'm sitting in the room with them, I can sense that lawyer B is getting a little twitchy, getting a little perturbed, starting to feel like, hey, lawyer B really needs to make this stop because it's having a problem. And I can pick up all that and I can intervene, right? So I can calm down lawyer A and say, we're going to save some of that for caucus. Let's talk about the next part of this proceeding. Through the glass, I'm going to have a more limited degree of success with that. And I think that that's something that parties need to be aware of. Likewise, when parties are trying to read each other or try to understand what the lawyer is saying, there can be miscommunication because the level of empathy is not going to be the same. And if you rely on emotional or intuition as a means of figuring out what's going on with people, you're going to be a little bit less successful behind the glass, I think, than when you're in person with people. The next one is a fairly common one. A lot of these platforms, and Zoom is one of them, does not have the ability to raise your hand, right? John was talking about how the interpreter just had to be like, hey, slow down, you're killing me. But unless the parties, sometimes they will raise their hands or they will be like, I'm trying to talk. In person, we would see that and you would react to it. But as a neutral and you've got 4 or 5 people in tiles around you, you might miss it. And there isn't any big red button that everybody can push that says, hey, I'm trying to get your attention, neutral. And so sometimes you might miss those signals. Those things can become obstacles to settlement unless you are made aware of them and you address them at the time that they come up. This is one of my favorites, is the where do I look, right? So, when they train people like Lester Holt, who's the newscaster for NBC News, he's trained to look at that camera in a particular way so that he is the most trusted newscaster in America. And people feel like they can connect with him through that camera, right? The rest of the world doesn't get that training. And so you get into a video conferencing platform and you need to know where to look. And it reminds me a lot of, and now I'm going to start showing you, my age, but when I began practicing law, there were not video depositions routinely taken. It was in an exceptional case. And John, you probably remember this too. And instead,
I started back in the 1900s. We had these things called books, typewriters.
And transcripts, right? Remember that? And that's what you'd go into trial with. You would bring the transcript in and you'd be reading from the transcript, and that's how you cross-examine the witness, right? No video, right? So then video depositions became a more standard and routine part of litigations. But one of the things that we would prep our witnesses on, and I believe people probably still do this today, is to instruct the witness about how to interact with that camera and who to interact with in that room, because the camera is recording everything that you do. Right, so you'll notice it in these video platforms. You'll see people looking everywhere. And then we have the huge distraction that comes up with looking at yourself, right? So if you're not practicing and you don't have the ability to not be totally distracted by how you look, sound, and what's going on with your wardrobe that particular day while you are sitting in a video conference, that's going to get in the way of paying attention to what really should be taking place during this mediation. So that's a new obstacle. It's something that comes up.
Chris, let me jump in for a second.
Sure.
One of the things that I think you've noticed, hopefully, about how Chris and I are presenting ourselves is that you cannot see our hands. We are only from here up. And there's a reason for that. I can take notes now without distracting people. I can write things down. I can work on my calculator. I can do whatever is necessary. That is done on purpose. So you need to practice again how you appear. Most people, Chris is right. It's weird looking at yourself for hours a day. Okay, it's a weird thing, and you got to get used to it. What I do is I take the breakout screen with all the buttons on it, and I put that white screen over myself. So I know what I look like. I don't have to look at myself the whole day. You need to take care of yourselves as mediators. here's a big difference I've seen in the last 2 months. I'm not hitting my 10,000 steps as easily as I used to because I'm not getting up and walking around. I'm going from room to room with the click of a button. And so make sure you take time for yourself. Sometimes when it's time to go between rooms, I say, folks, I need a couple minutes. I literally stand up and just walk around the house. All right. I need to get blood going to the feet again. And it gives me a couple of minutes to debrief with myself. Okay. At the end of a mediation, hopefully you have a settlement. How do you do that virtually? Let me give you some real quick tips. There is technology that does that. I've done it 2 or 3 ways. One is the one that is the least desirable but works. I get all the lawyers in the room. I say, we got a deal. All right. Who's going to start the email exchange back and forth, getting the deal documented with all the terms? And then I want to hear from all 4 participants that they have confirmed it online. I accept the deal, and it goes back and forth on email. And I usually am not willing to sign a report to the court that it's settled till somebody sends me a copy of the final signed document. I always suggest that they copy me on all those emails because that will, as far as I'm concerned, this is not a legal opinion or a judicial opinion. If I'm on the email, I think the mediation privilege still applies. I think the bubble is covering us if I'm on the email. Better is things like DocuSign and Adobe Sign. We are using DocuSign now. It's wonderful. Most lawyers are familiar with it. We have our typical settlement agreement. It's all set up. I say to the lawyers, listen, you guys work out all the details between yourselves on email. Once you got that done, you're going to cut and paste it right into the form. We send it to the defense lawyer first because they typically like more stuff in a document than a plaintiff's lawyer, who is typically concerned about, does the number have the right number of zeros after it? And then it goes bing, 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 bing to all the people, and then everybody gets a copy automatically through DocuSign. I will tell you, the lawyers are loving this. They don't have to send copies to their clients. We know that it's all documented. It's very intuitive to use DocuSign. I would recommend it. I know Adobe has the same platform. I don't know about Google Teams and Google Host and Hang with People or whatever the other ones are. I don't know, but
there are more signing apps out there, but those are the 2 that people use.
Right, and they work great. All right, what if the mediation isn't really over? What if the case does not settle at mediation? Again, it's the same as before and not the same. Okay, what and when and what to report to the court? I will not report to the court till I know that everybody has signed off. Follow up. I'm in the middle of 3 or 4 right now that I'm following up. And then we're going to reset up a second Zoom conference and, do all of that just like you would in a regular mediation. I keep a follow-up file and I follow up on my cases. Send your bills promptly. That's a practice tip. One of the things that's real important is that you're no longer limited to regular business hours. All right. And so all of a sudden, Lloyd's doesn't have to wait until you don't have to do Lloyd's early in the morning. Okay. You're at all different time zones. Be cognizant of that. But I've done some follow-up Zoom conferences at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. Sometimes it's just the lawyers. Sometimes it's a lawyer and their client who wasn't available during the day. I used to do those by phone. Now I still have that person-to-person interaction through a virtual platform. Don't give up. I have a colleague who tells a story about he was calling the lawyers while the jury was out when they were at trial and got it settled because nobody wanted to know what the jury was going to say. The jury sent back a question. He got a call, can we talk? And they settled it before the jury came back with the verdict. So those are all the practical tips that I think, and once again, Chris and I are here if you have any questions. Oh, that's a good lead in, a segue.
Yes, there we are.
Slide. Here's all our information. There's our websites and our email addresses. I think we all, as mediators, owe it to our profession to be able to communicate between each other with questions. I have kept constant contact throughout the years with mediation firms like myself and mediators like Chris and I. I have never viewed another mediator as a competitor. They're a colleague. People get themselves in all kinds of snits. We will always have business. So on behalf of me, thank you for watching. It's fun, guys. It's a lot of fun. So just continue to enjoy this wonderful practice.
Right. And I will say also thank you if you need, if you want information, I'm going to also put in a plug here for the ADR section for the Florida Bar. That is a great resource if you're trying to find people who are doing what you're doing, if you're trying to figure out how to solve a problem and you don't want to reinvent the wheel, talk to somebody at the ADR section and see if anybody has any knowledge. We have an executive council that has some of the most experienced mediators in the state. And from top to bottom, north to south, east to west, we can probably find an answer to your question. And if we can't, at least we can turn you loose, knowing that you have looked at one of the primary resources to see if you could get an answer to that question. But if you don't want to talk to the ADR section and you just want to talk to me, that's fine too.
Or me, yeah.
Yep. Call John, call me, reach out. See if you can let us know what's going on. We're always happy to help. And I want to thank you for your kind attention today. And with that, we're going to conclude our session on tips from the masters.
And Chris, I'm going to conclude this the way I have been concluding all of my Zoom mediations. Everybody stay safe and wash your hands.